And good morning, my brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ at Living Hope Community Church and Iglesia Esperanza Viviente and throughout the world. I want to welcome you to another study. Thank you again for your desire to know Jesus by learning what he's commanded and obeying what he's commanded. That's how we become disciples and follow him in spirit and in truth. I'm glad you're here on the journey. Today, we find ourselves in Acts chapter 27. This is basically narrative. It's just a story that tells us what happened. But in the midst of the story, we're going to see God move in a mighty way in two ways. One is Paul, the prisoner, who's on his way to Rome to be tried for no charge. They can't figure out what to accuse him of, but nonetheless, Felix doesn't want to deal with him. Festus doesn't want to deal with him. Agrippa doesn't want to deal with him. So they decide to send him to Rome. Maybe the Roman emperor can figure out what to do with him. Well, he eventually does, by the way. He kills him for no reason. But anyway, today we see the journey. And we watch this prisoner, Paul, be used by God to rise as a leader in the midst of all the trouble. He's not a sailor by trade. He doesn't know how to navigate these kinds of things, but yet God puts the leader, the one who follows him, in position to tell others what to do. Very interesting. And we also see the sovereignty of God, where God supernaturally makes sure that Paul gets to Rome unharmed. Let me show you what I'm talking about this morning. So in the first verse of 27, we read, "And when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius." So there's a guy that rules over 100 Roman soldiers. His name is Julius. He's in charge. They're taking other prisoners with them, as you see. So, okay, everybody on the boat, we're going to Rome. All right. And embarking in a ship of Adramyttium, which was about to sail to the ports along the coast of Asia, we put to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. Now, this is kind of interesting. Okay, they're using a little, maybe we should call it a little port hopper. The ship isn't designed to go into open sea. It's designed to just hop along the coast from port to port to port on the way around the Mediterranean into the region that they're trying to get to, right? Rome. All right, so that's what we're told about this ship. And notice that Aristarchus is with them. We know Aristarchus from Thessalonica. And in the end, just understand that God in his mercy allows people to be with Paul, and these people have a heart to go with Paul. I want you to notice, we put to sea. Do you see the we? That means Luke is back in the picture. He's traveling with Paul. As he records these things in chapter 27, he's recording his first-hand account as he experienced the journey. Here's a map. You see on the far right where it says Judea. That's where they're starting. The ship is intending to sail up along the coast to the north and then to the west. Along these very routes Paul has traveled before. They sail on the north side of Cyprus, and they're looking for an island called Crete there in the middle. You'll see that as the story progresses this morning. That's where a lot of the trouble comes. Paul's familiar with some of this. He's been on 3 missionary journeys through some of this territory, but watch what happens. Here they are. They're ready to go. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly. So this centurion in charge of Paul is not making Paul suffer in any way. Treated him kindly, gave him leave to go to his friends and be cared for. This is almost unheard of. What are you talking about? We have a day in port and you're going to let your prisoner go into town? I mean, this just shows you the trustworthiness of Paul and the fact that Julius understands that this man Paul is living to a different standard than most people, and he's not going to do anything to jeopardize Julius or jeopardize the trip to Rome. He's going to see his friends and let them be cared for. even though he's a prisoner and on his way to Rome for trial. Julius has great trust in him. But now they finally leave, and putting out to sea from there, we sailed under the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. I'm no sailor, and I don't understand sailing very well at all, but I do know this, that there's a period of time in the Mediterranean Sea from like mid-September to mid-November. It's a little more hazardous than normal times, okay? And after mid-November to about March, it's really hazardous. The winds become unpredictable. You can have what we would know on the east coast of the U.S. as a nor'easter. You can have a storm just pop up out of nowhere with hurricane force. All right, so there's a time frame involved in getting safe passage if you're sailing the Mediterranean. So when we see in verse 4, because the winds were against us, we're not really in trouble yet. The ships know how to, I think they call it tack, against the wind so that they can sail effectively. They're going up around the northern coast of the Middle East and Asia. They're heading towards the island of Crete. All right, here's how the story proceeds from there. And when we had sailed across the open sea, along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra in Lycia. Here's a little port. There the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing for Italy and put us on board. So this little port hopper ship that they started on is now replaced by a bigger ship that comes out of Egypt, Alexandria. Rome had these bigger ships that were meant to be able to withstand the burden of the open sea. They're getting ready now to get past the island of Crete and on into the open water on their way to Italy. When we sailed slowly for a number of days and we arrived with difficulty off Cnidus, and as the wind did not allow us to go farther, we sailed under the lee of Crete off Salmone. I don't know how to say that. In the end, what's happening? We see that the winds are shifting and the times are getting more treacherous because they're entering the time frame where anything can happen in the Mediterranean. It's taken them a long time to make this journey to the island of Crete. They're there now, but they're having trouble now. The weather is working against them, even with the bigger ship. All right, here comes crisis. Have you ever been tested in crisis? Sometimes God allows crisis, right? Because he wants to bring his message through his people to the people in the crisis, and because he wants to demonstrate to his own people that he is sovereignly and completely in control of any circumstance. We'll see that more in a second. Coasting along it with difficulty. In other words, now they're coming across the southern side of the island of Crete, as you saw on the map previously. Coasting along it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near which was the city of Lasea. Okay, Fair Havens is a place that most sailors are not happy to stay. All right? So they want to get out of there. They certainly don't want to be stuck there for the winter. Okay, since much time had passed, so the voyage is going slow. The voyage was now dangerous. Okay, because even the fast was already over. That's the atonement fast, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. All right, the calendar has shifted. We're heading into that dangerous time to sail. All right, so now we know that if we head out into open sea at this moment, we're in danger of having one of those huge storms show up. What should we do? Well, here comes the cream rising to the top. God uses the Apostle Paul. What does the Apostle Paul say? This is the slave prisoner, right? This is the guy that's on trial, what they think to be a criminal. All right, but yet God brings him to this situation, verse 10, saying, "Sirs, I perceive that the voyage will be with injury and much loss, not only of the cargo and of the ship, but also of our lives." If you guys want to take off this time of year, you need to really weigh your decision carefully, because we are in that time frame where anything can happen. All right? Paul issues a warning. But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than what Paul said. All right, well, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Would you listen to the prisoner, or would you listen to the pilot of the ship? All right, so the centurion has to make a decision, and because the harbor was not suitable to spend the winter in, that's Fair Haven, we know we got to get out of here, and the majority decided to put out to sea from there on the chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, which is about 40 miles farther along, facing both southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. So the goal becomes, let's get to this little town called Phoenix where there's a decent harbor. We can winter there. It's only 40 more miles. We should be able to make it. Now, when the south wind blew gently, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, they weighed anchor and sailed along Crete close to the shore. Aye, guess what? We're predicting these big, unpredictable hurricane-force storms. Well, today, there's a nice south wind. This is perfect. This is what we need. All we need to do is get that sail up and get 40 miles down the coast. We'll have a safe harbor to be in for the winter. Let's go. So, they pull up the anchor. Here we go. Let's see if we can make this happen. But soon, a tempestuous wind called the northeaster struck down from the land. So once they've committed to make this little 40-mile trip and try to get themselves all the way to this port called Phoenix, here we go. That dangerous storm shows up. What are we told? And when the ship was caught and could not face the wind, we gave way to it and were driven along. So now you're in a situation where, hey, we had a plan, but our ship doesn't have any power. You know, these ships didn't have motors, right? None of that was invented. They didn't have any way to fight against a nor'easter. This is hurricane force. This is like overwhelming. Even ships today would have very, very difficult times surviving this kind of storm. But in the ancient world, these ships were in great jeopardy once these kinds of storms showed up. They say, what? We gave way to it. All we can do is what? Hey, let's just take the sail down, pull the anchor up, and wherever this thing takes us, that's where we're going to go. Because to do something otherwise is to face these huge waves and end up perhaps having our ship break apart. Running under the lee of a small island called Cauda, we managed with difficulty to secure the ship's boat. That's the dinghy, okay? So they're in a terrible storm, and they're trying to deal with keeping the ship together while they move along. After hoisting it up, they used supports to undergird the ship. You know, in the old days, they didn't have nuts and bolts. These ships weren't built as our ships are today. So they would throw lines and try to get them under the ship and back up around to the other side so that they could secure the integrity, the structure of the ship. And that's what they're working on, trying to keep this ship together so that they don't all drown out in the middle of the Mediterranean. Then fearing that they would run aground on Syrtis, I don't know how to say that, they lowered the gear, and thus they were driven along. We give up, storm. Take us wherever you want to take us. That's the point. Since we were violently storm-tossed, they began the next day to jettison the cargo. Hey, what do we got to do? We got to lighten the load, because if we don't lighten the load, we'll be swamped by these huge waves. Let's get rid of all the stuff. I mean, we're really talking about desperate times, because this is how they make their money, right? By delivering the stuff. And on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. It's time for us to get rid of everything. Now imagine 72 hours of being tossed about like a little rag doll in these huge waves with this hurricane force wind. I mean, obviously the idea that you're going to die has come into your mind by now. And when neither the sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. We gave up. This is right where God intervenes, right? When you give up. when you're so overwhelmed by your circumstance that you have no options, you cannot control anything, you give up. That's what they're doing right here. And I want you to see the map again. You see the Isle of Crete right here in the middle. You see how it goes down below almost to the northern coast of Africa. This was like a ship junkyard in the ancient world, where ships that were caught in this kind of storm would come down to North Africa and get destroyed. Right? It's dark. They have clouds. Luke has told us we can't navigate by the stars because we can't see the stars. Oh, by the way, we threw all the tackle off. We don't have any way to do anything. But hey, guess what? God's going to help us. You see that red line that goes up towards Malta? That's the name of that little island on the left. Somehow, in spite of all this, the ability not to navigate, all the tackle's gone, all the equipment's gone, we've just let ourselves go. God takes this ship all the way across to Malta in this storm. I mean, we're watching a miracle, as understated as it might be. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, "The godly man comes again to lead the people in the crisis." Look at this. "Men, you should have listened to me and not set sail from Crete and incurred this injury and loss." So point number one, I told you so. Yet now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. The Lord has shown me. We're not going to die, but the ship is going to be destroyed. For this very night there stood before me an angel of God, to whom I belong and whom I worship. God has revealed the plan to Paul. And he said, "Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you." Paul declares what God has shown him. "So take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on some island. That's our job." Well, how does this end? Come back tomorrow. That's how it ends. I don't want to take any more of your time today, but just understand, Paul rises to the occasion because the Spirit of God is working through the one he loves. God's shown him what's going to happen. God's made the promise of his safe journey to Rome. And God, in his mercy, has said, "I am going to save the whole crew." Not the ship, but the whole crew. We'll see how God gets Paul all the way to Rome tomorrow. God bless you, church. Serve him well today.
Who is it who for sinners shed his blood, and now for cleansing all can plunge beneath that flood? It's Jesus. But do you know who he is? He's the image of the invisible God, and he's the brightness of his glory. The first, the last, the future, the past. He is God.